Hello, I'm Daniel Shue, the Old House Agent. I'm a licensed real estate agent in Virginia and Tennessee, and I'm a real estate agent at Prestige Homes of the Tri-Cities in Bristol, Tennessee, and I specialize in the sale of historic homes. Today we're here at Pleasant Hill in Bristol, Virginia. This is the former home of noted historian and author Bud Phillips. I'm sure many of you know that name very well. My wife and I purchased this property a few years back and turned it into a historic vacation rental. We've restored what Bud didn't finish and kept what he did do, and it's become a great place to stay for people that visit our wonderful town. Today we are going to talk about historic windows. We're going to talk about the preservation of historic windows. We're going to talk about the restoration of historic windows, and we're actually going to talk about the replacement of historic windows, why you should and why you should not do that. Right here beside me on the front porch of Pleasant Hill is one of the original 9-foot tall window openings. And what these windows comprise of is a top sash and a bottom sash. This wooden piece right here is called a muntin, and it connects each piece of glass, which is individual, unlike today's windows. And then the pieces of glass are held in with small metal pieces. Then they add putty to hold the glass in securely and to stop drafts. The bottom sash has ropes attached to it which go up into the casing with weights inside that allow you to raise the sash, and it's held in place without having to put a stick under it. This was mainly a feature probably done after the mid-19th century. Before that, many times they would have some kind of connector or device that would hold the window in place, or simply use a wooden stick to prop it up. So we're going to talk about preservation and restoration before we get to replacement. This is a perfect example of a window you do not want to replace. These windows are in amazing condition. They were covered for over 100 years by this porch, and so the weather did not affect them very much. These are in need of some restoration in the next few years. They're not drafty, but they have been painted and caulked shut over a period of time. And so the paint is in good shape. The putty or glazing is actually in good shape. Most of the glass is hand-blown glass that's original. We've had to replace a few pieces. And what I want to talk about right now is the paint, because many people think that when the paint begins to peel on a window, it's time to replace them. Well, that's just paint. That is no reason to replace a window, especially a period window. This is old growth wood that was cut over 100 years ago. It's tighter grain. It's just a better quality wood to work with. And so it's not going to rot easily. It's not going to decay very fast. And it's just good. It's just a good practice to use old growth. What you would want to do if you have peeling paint is strip this down, sand it, prime it, paint it, make sure any missing putty is replaced. But you do want to be careful about lead paint, possible lead in the glazing, and use proper precautions when you are stripping that paint and putty off. Also, another reason to not replace your windows is your carbon footprint, because when you really think about this, there is energy and labor and materials that go into the making of new windows. And to take these that already exist, that are high quality old growth wood, and put them in a landfill to rot for 50 years is not very helpful to our environment. What you can do if you're worried about drafty windows and they do not fit quite well and you can't restore them to make them fit quite well, is you can opt for storm windows. Those can be placed on the exterior or the interior, which is what we chose to do at the King House. That way when you're looking at the house from the outside, it looks original and you can't tell you even have storm windows. So your first priority in restoring a window in an old house should be preservation and restoration. These are very important aspects of the house. The eyes are the window to the soul. The windows are the window to the house's soul. So sometimes you cannot do that though. These are great. We've bought houses that had terrible windows that were original that could not be salvaged at all. And so that's when replacement comes in. And when you want to replace them, you're going to know that point, because you're going to see there's going to be major breaks. There's going to be more than a corner that's rotten. You can fix a corner by adding what's called a Dutchman, when you cut out a small piece of wood, put in a new piece of wood, putty that, make sure everything works right. So there are plenty of ways to fix these, but there are also times when you should understand that they need to be replaced. You want to see if these muntins are in good condition. A broken muntin can be repaired too, but if you have 4 or 5 on one sash, you're talking about a big problem there. You want to see how loosely they fit. A lot of rot will actually happen at the bottom of the window, on the windowsill where the weather comes in. You want to see what you're dealing with there. Do you just replace the bottom board, or do you replace the whole window? When you're replacing them, you have to work with an expert and know what you're dealing with so that you don't just do a 25-year fix, but you're doing a 100-year fix. And in order to talk about that, I've got my friend Scotty Graham here with us today with Home Choice Windows and Doors.
Yes, sir.
And he is happy to come and talk to us about replacement now that I've covered preservation. So Scotty, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is a beautiful home. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
Thank you. Can we dig into what I was talking about earlier, how these windows fail and when is a good time to replace them?
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on a lot of the main points. One of the biggest differences between what we have here versus what we would have in a rehabilitation window is the pane, right? This is a single pane window. What we would sell in a rehabilitation would be a double pane window, which will vastly improve your energy efficiency and your operation will be smoother. And you talked about the weight balance system. Now these walls are 12, 14 inches thick?
I think they're 14.
14 inches thick to leave room for a cavity for those weights to open. That's incredible. Incredible engineering. Today, the engineering has gotten, it's gotten better. Technology's gotten better. And so all of that balance and tackle system is within the window unit. So there's a couple differences there's a lot of differences really between this and what we would sell in a rehabilitation window.
That's awesome. Now, when you talk about double pane, the reason they are energy efficient is because the air actually creates an insulation, is that right?
Correct, yeah. So you have 2 panes of glass, and in between the glass it's filled with argon gas. And that argon gas is what provides the energy efficiency against UV rays and protection for the items inside your home even. So.
Awesome. Well, that's awesome. And you have told me that you all carry both double pane and you can actually make single pane windows that are identical to the original ones.
We can, yeah. And that's, single pane windows don't meet residential code in Tennessee, and I don't believe they do in Virginia either. But there's certain instances where they're approved for historical projects such as this, where, yes, some of our manufacturers, they have single pane options. They have a wood exterior and a wood interior option, whereas most manufacturers now, they only do a clad option where the exterior would be clad in aluminum. So yes, our manufacturers specialize in these kind of projects.
Well, thanks, Scotty, for that great info. So now what we're going to do is go inside and look at some samples he has and talk about efficiency, quality, value, and all those things. So let's go in. Okay, now we're inside Pleasant Hill to take a look at some of these windows with Scotty, and what he has here is a sample that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, Daniel, so what we have here is an example of a dumble hung window, like the one we talked about outside. And so both sashes move, the top sash moves, the bottom sash moves, and I'm sure you're aware, but some of our viewers might not be, that the reason windows were created this way is because of a lack of air conditioning. So they would crack the top sash, open the bottom sash, air would flow in from the bottom and the heat would go out the top. And that formed a little bit of a natural air conditioning.
I don't think a lot of people knew that the top sash would come down as well, because now they're just stuck up there with paint.
Right. And so a couple of the things that makes this an architecturally and a historically correct window would be the way that these rails meet right here. So from the bottom sash rail to the top sash rail, a lot of times on windows, this top sash will actually butt up above the hardware instead of being a flat surface like that. That's one of the tells. Another tell would be the joints here. So these are butt jointed, so the pieces come straight against each other. Whereas a lot of window manufacturers now will, especially on the outside, will do miter joints where they're cut at a 45-degree angle, and that's one of the tells of a historically correct window versus not. The other thing would be the hardware. So this hardware mimics, it even mimics, I was looking at the windows that you have here, it mimics the hardware you had almost perfectly.
It does very much.
So, those are a couple of things that make this window, historically correct.
And the back of the window, which is the outside, which we're not looking at right now, it's what's the finish on it?
Yeah, so the whole frame is wood. So the interior is wood, the frame is wood, but the exterior would be clad in aluminum. So this is an extruded aluminum. It's not roll formed. It's not something that you would find like on a soda can or something. It's thick extruded aluminum that will weather well. And that's one of the differences between, like we talked about outside, the differences between period windows versus rehabilitation windows is the aluminum was created to protect that wood, so that these should be a once in a lifetime type replacement. And it also helps with a little bit of the thermal efficiency.
Wow, yeah. So you don't have to paint them, and you don't have to reglaze them.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So instead of buying 100 years, you might be buying 200 years.
Exactly. Yeah, and looking at your windows that have lasted this long undercover, if you had something like this, it's not going to fade. It's not going to take any damage from the sun. It's a really good option for rehabilitation when you still want to preserve the fabric of an old building like this.
Absolutely. And you've used this type of window in historic towns where they have historic overlays, and some of these things have been acceptable?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have several manufacturers that have these type of windows, and we've done, some of our manufacturers have done, there's an old church in Jonesboro, there's the Martha Washington Inn in
wonderful.
Abingdon. We've done the old Standard Mill building in Johnson City. So they're historically correct and approved by the historical district's guidelines.
Fantastic. So we've got another sample here. Scotty, tell us a little bit about what you brought.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, one of our manufacturers makes a historically correct commercial door application, and that's what this is. So it's wood interior, wood exterior, and it's actually got a single pane. So one really cool thing about this door is it's got a removable energy pane. So this could be taken off in a time of a tour, or in a time of, showcasing.
Oh, yeah.
A historical aspect of the building or something. But then for everyday use, you could throw in this energy pane, and it would protect against, like we talked about, a lot more of those UV rays and the thermal efficiency. So this door is great for when, again, like I said, if you want to preserve the fabric of this old building, you don't want to put an aluminum storefront door out there. You could, but it doesn't really preserve the fabric, right? And that's what we like to talk about a lot, is this would show what it would have been made like, but it'll be new, and it'll last a long time.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, that's beautiful. It reminds me of, if you're automatically thinking about, well, why are they talking about replacing a door on an old building? The post office in Bristol, Virginia, it had like an aluminum door that was added in probably the 70s, and they replaced it with wood like it would have had originally.
Okay.
So this is in that same context of
Absolutely.
why you would want to replace a commercial door.
Absolutely. It brings a lot more of the original life back to the building.
Yeah, and essentially this little guy is sort of like an interior storm window.
It
It's
is.
really neat.
It functions the same way. Yeah, it's really cool that they were able to figure out how to do that and still make it look right.
So today we've talked about preservation, restoration, and possible replacement of historic windows. But we're also going to talk about this little model right here. And this is not an example of a restoration or a window that's fitting into a neighborhood where there's a historic overlay or something, but perhaps you're building a new house, or the windows are totally gone and you have to replace them, and you're not going to be constrained by something. So Scotty, what do we have here?
Yeah, so this is an example of a casement window. So as opposed to the double hung, which we talked about and which you have here in this house, a casement window, this is cased in a full case, and this sash would operate on a hinge similar to a door.
Oh, wow.
Right, and so when I grew up, my grandmother had old casement windows in her house, and those we had to hang on the lever to get them to open up. But now, these work smooth, and so we've seen these work great, even in some historical context, depending on the time period of the building. But the main reason I wanted to showcase this, Daniel, was because of the muntins here. So this is an example. This would be called a putty style muntin. Again, giving homage to how they used to putty in the divided lights. So each of these openings we would call a light. And like you pointed out outside, this is all one piece of glass behind the whole window, but now it's divided. It's a simulated divide with these muntins, and we call that, this is the putty style, which again pays homage to the historical way that they used to actually authentically divide the lights.
Okay, so you've got a new window, a very modern window, but from the road it looks historic.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming on today and filling us in a little bit about replacement versus restoration and when we should do that.
Absolutely.
And I hope you'll come back and see us sometime soon.
I'll be happy to. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in today, and I'm certainly glad to bring you inside Pleasant Hill. I'm sure a lot of people are curious as to what it looks like, and many of you probably knew Bud. He was certainly a treasured person in our town. So it was wonderful speaking to you about preservation and restoration of windows, and also replacement of windows and when you should do that. I am Daniel Shue, the Old House Agent, and I will see you next time.